I walked in, the smell of garlic and onion filling the air. Tuesday night, the same as any other, except it wasn't. It felt like there was a weight pressing on my chest the moment I crossed the threshold. Lily was at the stove, humming to herself as she stirred something in a pan. She didn't turn around. She didn't even look up when I walked into the kitchen. I set my briefcase down on the counter and leaned against it, watching her. She'd been distant the past few days, but I figured it was just the usual. Work stress. Maybe some personal stuff. We'd been here before. But this was different. Something smells good, I said, trying to sound normal, trying to mask the creeping tension in my stomach. She didn't respond right away, just kept humming. Finally, she turned, put a plate down in front of me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dinner," she said flatly. She slid into her seat, her eyes barely meeting mine. I started eating. Something in my gut told me not to, but I did. Then, without warning, she dropped it. "I'm in love with someone else." The fork paused halfway to my mouth. My stomach churned. I didn't know what to say. The words hit me like a punch, but I couldn't find my breath. I put the fork down slowly, not trusting my hands to hold it steady. "Who?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Connor," she said, as if it were just another fact to report. "You've met him, my coworker." Connor. I'd met him a couple of times, casual hellos, small talk at company events. I never thought anything of it. Never even considered he could be a threat. "You've been seeing him?" I let the question hang in the air, not sure what else to ask, what was worth asking. "Yeah," she said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "It just happened." I stared at her. "You didn't think to tell me before?" She shrugged, her expression indifferent. "I didn't see the point. You've been distant too. It wasn't like we were connected anymore." I blinked, trying to process. "So that's it? You've just checked out?" Her eyes met mine for a split second, then quickly darted away. "I don't need to explain myself to you." I felt a coldness creeping into me, something I hadn't expected. A quiet, calculating detachment. A part of me wanted to scream, to argue, but another part just shut down. I felt the knot tighten, the emotional ties unraveling. This wasn't a conversation about betrayal. This was a conversation about survival. I took a deep breath. "So what now?" Lily reached for her wine glass, swirling it before taking a sip. "We move on. You do your thing. I do mine." It was like she was discussing moving furniture, not ending a marriage. I didn't respond. I just nodded and finished my dinner in silence. She didn't say another word either. We ate like nothing had changed, but everything had. The dinner table felt like a tomb after she dropped the bomb. I pushed my plate away, feeling the weight of her words settling in the pit of my stomach. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head, but I said nothing, just finished chewing, swallowed, and stared at the remnants of dinner. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to beg for answers or explanations. What was there to say? She'd already made up her mind. It was clear now that we were two strangers sharing a house, a life that had already ended for her. I didn't even feel anger, just a quiet, numbing realization that whatever I thought I knew about our marriage was gone. She didn't talk to me the rest of the night. Neither did I. I let her go upstairs while I stayed downstairs, pacing, thinking. She had been distant for months, no longer. Her absence, her coldness, all of it finally made sense. The late nights at work, the unexplained weekends with friends, the texts she'd started leaving open, the ones with half-words, a few too many emojis. It was all there, but I had ignored it, or maybe I hadn't wanted to see it. I stood by the sink watching the water run, and for the first time in a long while, I realized that this was all a game to her. She was done. It was over for her, but I hadn't even started moving on. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to get dragged into some messy, emotional spectacle. That wouldn't fix anything. I was going to do what I'd always done, stay ahead. I walked into the office. The room smelled of stale coffee and the faint scent of old paper. I opened the filing cabinet. The safe was tucked behind a row of folders. It was all there, the wills, the business contracts, the investments. Everything I needed. The legal shit I'd been preparing for without even realizing it. I ran my hand over the leather-bound binder where I kept the business papers, my personal finances. Some people keep a backup plan for things like this, but I had planned for it all. I had my backup plans for my backup plans. Sitting at the desk, I pulled the drawer open and dug through the papers until I found the one I was looking for. The prenup. We'd signed it years ago. I didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't think she would ever need it. But now, it was the first thing I needed to look at. It was airtight. All of it. My company, my assets, my future. None of it would touch her. No matter what she tried to pull in court, it was already set up. I could hear the faint sounds of her moving around upstairs. The soft thud of her footsteps. It didn't matter anymore. She was upstairs, probably thinking everything would go her way. But I had already made sure that wouldn't happen. I sat back in the chair, staring at the stack of documents. I had no intention of fighting her for petty things. I didn't care about the house or the car. I just wanted out. Clean. Neat. Without the mess. She'd made her choice, and now I was making mine. I could already hear the arguments in court. See the way Lily would try to paint herself as the victim, just like she'd always done. But none of it would matter. I was prepared. She had no idea just how much. I exhaled and stood up, walking toward the filing cabinet to lock everything away. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. About maintaining control when she was already too far gone. Upstairs, I could hear her in the bathroom, the soft sound of water running. I walked back to my chair, sitting down again with a cold, steady certainty. It was done. I had nothing left to do but wait. Tomorrow I'd meet with my lawyer. After that, it was time to start moving on. But tonight, I just sat there, alone in the office, feeling the weight of the next steps settle over me like a second skin. Lily was upstairs, but she wasn't my problem anymore. I heard the doorbell ring, pulling me out of my thoughts. For a moment, I just stared at the papers scattered across the desk, feeling the weight of everything pressing in. Then I stood up, pushing the chair back a little too hard, and walked to the front door. Emma stood there with her usual casual smile, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She'd been away at college for a few months, but it didn't feel like she'd been gone at all. "Hey, Dad," she said, her tone light. "How've you been?" I let her in, a little caught off guard by how normal she seemed, like nothing had changed. I hadn't expected her to come back for a few more days. Her presence, so unburdened, felt jarring against the backdrop of everything I was trying to process. "Been better," I said, closing the door behind her. I didn't know how much I wanted to tell her, or how much I could say. "You look okay, though." She shrugged, glancing around the house like she was scanning for signs of life. "How's everything here? Mom doing all right?" Her question hit me like a slow-moving train, but I didn't let it show. I felt the tightness in my chest again, that familiar hollow ache. "Come sit down," I said, leading her into the living room. She dropped her bag and collapsed onto the couch, as relaxed as if she'd just walked into any other Tuesday night at home. I sat across from her, trying to find a way to start. I wanted to ask her if she knew what was really going on, if she'd sensed anything off before. Instead, I found myself bracing for the next words out of her mouth. "I talked to Mom yesterday," she said casually, kicking off her shoes. "She told me about the affair." I froze. The words stuck in my throat. "She told you?" Emma nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Yeah." Said it was a complicated situation, but she was in love with Connor, and she didn't want to hurt you. Her expression didn't change. "I'm good with it. I mean, you're both adults, right? You've got to do what makes you happy." My heart sank. Her detachment, her tone like she was reciting a weather forecast, twisted something inside me. "So, you're okay with this?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "Yeah." She shrugged again, like it wasn't a big deal. "Mom says it's a fresh start, you know? She's doing what she needs to do for herself, and I guess that's cool. People grow. They change." She didn't seem to register the magnitude of what she was saying, the destruction of everything I'd believed in. I stared at her, my daughter, and realized with a sinking feeling that she wasn't going to be the person I could talk to about any of this. She was already on her mother's side, even if she didn't fully understand what that meant. You don't think, I don't know, that maybe there's more to it than just that? I tried, but my words felt pointless. She looked at me, confused. Like what? Like maybe, I don't know, the way she's been acting for the past few months? All the time she's spent away from here? I pressed, but I felt like I was talking to a wall. Emma, don't you see that something's been off for a long time? Don't you think it matters that she's been lying to both of us? Emma blinked, then let out a short laugh. Dad, don't overthink it. Mom's not perfect, but she's allowed to make mistakes. It's not like you've been totally present either. You two just, I don't know, drifted apart. It happens. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. She was right. I had been distant, but this wasn't about distance. This was betrayal, and she didn't get it. She couldn't see it. She hadn't seen any of it. Do you even care what this means for us? I asked, my voice a little harsher than I'd intended. For the family? Emma shifted, looking uncomfortable. I care, Dad, but I also get that you guys aren't happy anymore. And I guess, I don't know, I don't really see the point in fighting over it. I just stared at her. I didn't know what else to say. She was already framing it like Mom had, as some kind of personal growth moment. A fresh start. A chance to shed old skin, like everything we built together didn't matter. I felt a sharp, painful jolt. It wasn't just Lily who had let go of our family. Emma had too. She was already walking away from it all, convinced that this was the way things were supposed to be. No tears, no anger, just detachment. Like it was just a new chapter and nothing more. I ran a hand through my hair. I didn't think you'd see it like that. She met my eyes, her expression unreadable. I don't think there's anything to see, Dad. It's just life. I felt cold. Not from the temperature of the room, but from the realization that she wasn't going to be the one who'd understand. She wasn't the ally I thought she might be. Her mother had already won her over. Just like that. I'll be upstairs if you need me, Emma said, standing up and heading for the stairs. Her tone was back to normal, casual. Just wanted to check in. I nodded, watching her disappear up the stairs, my chest heavy. It was all slipping away. It wasn't just Lily anymore. Even Emma had started to reframe the narrative the way Lily had. What was once a family had already become a distant memory, something I wasn't even sure I could hold on to anymore. I sat there for a long time after Emma went upstairs, the house suddenly feeling empty. The meeting with Mara was set for 10 a.m. I'd already gathered everything I needed, the prenup, my financial statements, business records. I wasn't going into this blind. I'd been preparing for a moment like this for years, setting things up in ways Lily would never have understood. She didn't care about the future, not in the way I did. But I had always been a few steps ahead. Mara's office was sleek, all polished wood and glass, with a no-nonsense energy to it. She stood as I walked in, a sharp, professional woman who wasted no time on pleasantries. She was all business, the kind of attorney you didn't want to piss off. She didn't look like someone who'd flinch at a complicated divorce case. She looked like someone who could turn it into a chess game, and I liked that. You must be Jason, she said, extending her hand. Let's get to it. I shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip. I hadn't expected this to be easy, but I hadn't anticipated how much I'd appreciate her directness. She motioned for me to sit. Tell me everything you know. I didn't hesitate. My wife's in love with someone else, I said, as if it were the most basic thing in the world. She's been having an affair for months. I found out a few days ago. Mara didn't flinch. She simply nodded and opened her notebook, scribbling down a few quick notes. And you want to move forward with the divorce? Yeah, I said, but I want to protect my assets. The business, my investments, everything. I want it all locked down. I've spent years setting up trusts and legal protections in case something like this ever happened. Mara raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you were expecting this. I've been expecting something, I replied. I'm not surprised she did this. I'm surprised she did it this way with someone I've met. But I wasn't blind to the cracks. She looked up from her notes, meeting my gaze with a directness that felt almost like a challenge. You've got a good setup here. We'll need to move quickly, but we'll protect what's yours. The goal here is to keep her from getting anything. And I mean anything. I felt a sharp satisfaction at her words, like she was echoing the exact plan I'd already set in motion. That's the idea. She flipped through some documents on her desk, skimming them before speaking again. The first thing we'll need to do is ensure your business assets are completely shielded. You've set up the trusts well, but we'll need to make sure she doesn't have access to them. We'll also need to separate your personal finances from the business holdings, more than you already have. Everything has to be airtight. I've already separated things, I said. Most of it is already in separate accounts. Everything from the business is protected. I've been careful. Mara nodded approvingly, her tone clinical but appreciative. Good. But we'll need to make sure the paperwork is all in order and that she can't make any claims. As for the house, the cars, the retirement funds, everything's going to have to be divided. We'll make sure it's a fair split on paper, but I'll be pushing hard to keep it as minimal as possible on her end. I didn't care about the house. I didn't care about the cars. This wasn't about anything material. It was about making sure she didn't take what wasn't hers. Keep it minimal, I said. She pulled out a sheet of paper and began jotting down some figures. You've set yourself up well. That's good. There's always a risk with a high-net-worth divorce. She might try to claim something, drag things out, but I can make sure this goes as smoothly as possible. You've got the leverage, Jason. She's going to find herself with less than she expects. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a strange satisfaction in hearing it said out loud. I'd built this life. I'd built this business from the ground up. There wasn't going to be a mess of lawyers fighting over scraps. It was already handled. Mara looked at me again, this time with a little more empathy. This isn't just about the money, is it? You're not just looking for a financial win. No, I said quietly, feeling the weight of the truth. I'm looking to make sure she doesn't walk away with everything. She made a note in her file and gave me a small nod. Understood. We spent the next hour going over details, revising the paperwork, and finalizing everything. Every line I signed, every document I approved, was another step toward shutting her out of my future. By the time we were done, I felt like I had the control I needed. Everything was in place. You're going to be fine, Mara said as she stood up, offering her hand again. You've done the hard work already. This won't be easy, but we'll make sure it's clean. We'll make sure she doesn't get anything she hasn't earned. I shook her hand firmly, the sense of finality settling over me. Thanks. I appreciate it. As I walked out of her office, I felt like I was stepping into something different. Not a divorce, not an end, but a new phase of my life. One where the chaos of betrayal and emotion wouldn't rule me, where I could move forward, calm and deliberate, leaving everything behind with as little noise as possible. It was a war, but it wasn't going to be fought with words or emotions. It would be fought with strategy, and I was ready for it. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished wood. Mara and I walked in, and I could feel the tension hanging in the air, thick like a storm cloud. This wasn't some negotiation I could control with a handshake. This was the first round of a fight that I wasn't about to lose. I sat in the back, trying to keep my presence minimal, but it didn't take long before I spotted Lily across the room. She was sitting with her lawyer, Connor's name never far from her lips in those private conversations. She looked the same, calm, composed, like she'd done this 100 times, almost like she was waiting for this moment, poised and ready to play the victim. Her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man who looked like he'd been trained for this exact kind of case, stood when the judge entered. The proceedings began, and I leaned back, watching as Lily's lawyer laid out their demands. He spoke with a smooth confidence, but I could tell from his stance that this was more about playing to the judge than anything else. We are requesting a 50-50 division of all assets, including the business, Lily's lawyer said, his voice like silk over stone. Mr. Hayes has built an empire, yes, but his wife has been an equal partner in supporting him and raising their daughter. She deserves her fair share. I held my ground, saying nothing. It wasn't the first time I'd heard someone claim that my success was a partnership. Lily had said it before, but there was something about hearing it in the courtroom that felt different. It was all so clean, so clinical. But I knew it was nothing more than a power play. Mara stood up, cutting through the lawyer's presentation without missing a beat. Your Honor, we do not contest the divorce, but we do contest the financial demands. Mr. Hayes's assets are well protected, and we will ensure that they remain separate. The business, in particular, was established well before the marriage and has been managed as a separate entity for the duration of the marriage. Her words were like a shield, defending everything I'd carefully set up. I could feel a quiet satisfaction inside me, knowing that Mara was going to handle this with precision. She had my back, and I didn't need to say a word. Lily's lawyer shot a look at Mara, then turned back to the judge. We understand the claim, but we are confident that the division of assets will be evaluated equitably. Mr. Hayes's business is worth millions, and Mrs. Hayes is entitled to a share. We will argue that the support and sacrifices she made in the marriage warrant her participation in those assets. I glanced at Lily. She had her head down, eyes focused on her hands in her lap, but I could tell by the way she was holding herself that she was trying to control the situation. Her shoulders were tense, her jaw tight. She wasn't as calm as she appeared. She was frustrated. It was clear that things weren't going as smoothly as she'd expected. Mara raised an eyebrow as she flipped through some papers. Your Honor, Mrs. Hayes has already made her decision. She's left the marriage, she's in a relationship with another man, and she's chosen to pursue this path. We will not allow for any claim to Mr. Hayes's business or assets under these circumstances. I didn't react. I didn't want to give anything away. I could feel the calmness in my own demeanor, the way I was holding myself together while Lily fidgeted beside her lawyer. I didn't need to play their game. My silence was part of my strategy. I was letting them dig themselves into a hole. Her lawyer's voice grew sharper. This isn't about emotional pleas, Mara. We're talking about the future of a family. We'll be pursuing all avenues to make sure Mrs. Hayes is treated fairly. The word fairly hung in the air like a challenge. It was a word they used often in divorce cases, but I didn't buy it. There was no fairness in this. Not anymore. Lily's lawyer continued, pushing harder. But the more he spoke, the more frustrated he seemed. It was clear that they weren't getting the response they expected. Lily kept her gaze fixed forward, not daring to look at me, but I could see the way she shifted in her seat. She wasn't controlling this. She wasn't going to win. The judge, an older man with a stern face, leaned forward. I'll review the documents. We'll set the next hearing date for a more thorough discussion of the division of assets. That was it. The first round was over. As we stood to leave, I could see the irritation on Lily's face, the way her lawyer's eyes darted between the two of us. Mara and I walked out without another word to them. I kept my focus ahead, blocking out the tension between us. Once we were outside the courtroom, Mara turned to me, her expression unreadable. It's not over yet, but we're in a good position. I nodded, a tight smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. I'm not in a hurry. Mara gave me a quick look, then a small smile. Good. Don't let them rush you. As we walked down the hallway toward the exit, I felt the weight of the next steps ahead of me, but there was something oddly reassuring about the silence I held. I wasn't fighting a battle of words or emotions anymore. I was fighting a war of wills, and it wasn't going to be one with noise. Lily's frustration only made me more certain. She hadn't expected me to stand still, to remain calm, but I was, and that made all the difference. As we stepped out of the courthouse, I expected Lily to keep her distance, but she followed me, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Jason, she called after me, her voice wavering slightly. I didn't turn around at first. I just kept walking, feeling the cold air hit me as we stepped outside. I could hear her footsteps behind me, getting closer, until she finally caught up. Please, can we talk? She said, the words coming out softer now. Just for a minute. I stopped, but only because I could already feel the tension between us thickening. What is it, Lily? She hesitated before speaking, her gaze darting around as if she wasn't sure where to start. I just want you to understand. She swallowed, her voice almost pleading. I didn't do this to hurt you. You have to believe me. I didn't want it to be like this. I found my true self with Connor. I didn't say anything, just let her words hang in the air. I didn't need her explanations anymore. The woman who stood in front of me was not the woman I had married. And I couldn't feel sorry for her anymore. I don't want any drama, she continued, the frustration creeping into her voice. I just want to move on, to move forward. We've both changed, and it's better this way. Don't you think? Don't you want me to be happy? I looked at her, and for the first time, I realized that her words weren't for me. She wasn't trying to explain herself or apologize. She was trying to absolve herself, to make herself feel better about what she'd done. But I wasn't the one who needed convincing. She didn't need my forgiveness. She needed to feel like she wasn't the villain in her own story. I took a deep breath, but there was nothing left inside me to respond with. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just done. I don't need you to explain yourself, I said, my voice flat. You've already made your choices, Lily, and I've made mine. She flinched at the bluntness of my words, but she quickly masked it, forcing a weak smile. I know it's hard to understand, but I'm not the same person I was when we got married. I've changed. I needed this change. I felt something inside me snap, a hard, cold clarity that made it easier to look at her and not feel anything. She wasn't asking for understanding. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was trying to make herself the victim, trying to make this all seem like it was some kind of inevitable shift, like I was the one who had held her back. I couldn't even muster the energy to feel betrayed anymore. It was like a part of me had already checked out long before the divorce papers were filed. Her attempt to paint this as some sort of tragic personal growth only made me realize how little she cared about what we had. Lily, I said, cutting her off, you left me long before you found Connor. You checked out of this marriage a long time ago, and now you want to walk away with everything, just like you always have. Her face tightened. That's not fair. No, I said, a slight edge creeping into my voice. What's not fair is that you made your choice. You've been making it for months. And now you want me to go along with this idea that we can just part ways with no consequences. That's not how this works. Her frustration was evident now. She crossed her arms, staring at me as though she expected me to cave. I didn't want any of this to be a fight, Jason. I didn't want to drag things out. I thought we could handle this like adults. I almost laughed, but I didn't. There was nothing funny about this situation. You've already handled it. You made your decision. You've been making it for months, and now I'm the one left picking up the pieces. So no, Lily, we're not going to handle this like adults. You can't just rewrite the narrative now. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't let her. I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't going to be drawn into her drama, her emotional games. I've made my peace, I said, my voice colder than I intended. The next steps will be handled through the lawyers. I don't need to talk to you about this anymore. Her eyes flashed with something. Anger? Maybe, or maybe just disbelief. But I saw the cracks in her carefully constructed mask. She wasn't the confident woman she'd been in court. Here, without her lawyer, she was just someone who wanted to feel justified. And she wasn't going to get that from me. I'm done, Lily, I said, the finality of it hanging in the air. You've already made your choice, and now it's time for me to make mine. She didn't respond, just stared at me for a moment, then turned away, walking toward her car without another word. As I watched her go, I felt nothing. Not anger, not relief, just nothing. It was over, and I had finally accepted it. I turned and walked back to my car, the sound of her heels fading behind me. The fight wasn't over, but I'd already won. The days after the hearing passed in a blur of paperwork and quiet reflection. Every time I sat down at my desk, I could hear the faint echo of Lily's voice in my head, the way she tried to guilt me into understanding her side. I didn't care about her side anymore. I wasn't here to fix things or make her feel better. I was here to make sure she didn't take what wasn't hers. I reviewed the documents again for what felt like the 100th time. Each page, each clause carefully constructed. Everything was locked down. Everything was in its place. I wasn't going to leave any cracks for her to slip through. She and Connor thought they had me cornered, but they didn't realize how far ahead I'd planned. I'd made sure the assets I wanted to protect were hidden in places Lily wouldn't even know to look. Trusts, offshore accounts, investments. It wasn't about hiding money. It was about keeping control. They could go after what they thought was fair, but they wouldn't get a dime of what they really wanted. The final documents Mara had prepared sat in front of me, ready to be signed. She'd gone over them with me earlier, double-checking every detail. She was meticulous, and I appreciated that. Every word, every number, every date. It was all set up to keep my financial future secure and to make sure Lily got nothing beyond what was legally hers. I sat there for a long time, running through the details in my mind. The next steps were clear, but I needed to be sure. I didn't want any surprises down the line. I wasn't going to let Lily or Connor pull a fast one. Mara had confirmed everything was airtight. "No way they're getting through this," she'd said, tapping the final page with a sharp nail. "This isn't just a divorce, Jason. It's a strategy. A silent war." I didn't need to hear her say it again, but I liked hearing it from her. The woman knew what she was doing. I wasn't just protecting assets. I was setting a trap, one that would close around Lily and Connor when they least expected it. The room was quiet as I took the pen in my hand. My mind was strangely calm, detached even. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing this because it was necessary. I signed the first document, then the next and the next. Every signature felt like a final step away from the life I used to know. Each one was a nail in the coffin of my past. I could almost hear Lily's voice again, asking for fairness, for a clean break. She wouldn't get it. She wanted to leave me behind and take everything with her. She wanted a fresh start, but what she didn't know was that I had already planned my own. When I finished, I leaned back in my chair, looking at the stack of signed papers in front of me. The trap was set. Mara had ensured the trusts were locked down, the business was secured, and the assets Lily thought she could claim were now beyond her reach. I wasn't interested in a long, drawn-out battle. I didn't need to waste energy fighting her in court. I just needed to let the legal process take its course. The more I said, the more it would give them a chance to react, to counter. My silence was the sharpest weapon I had left. There was no satisfaction in the moment. No glee in the thought of Lily's frustration when she realized the depth of the preparation. It was just the way it had to be. I wasn't playing by her rules. I was playing by mine. I placed the pen down on the desk, looking over the documents once more, just to be sure. This was it. There was nothing more to do. I'd made my peace. I stood, gathered the papers, and carefully placed them in an envelope. The next move was out of my hands now. All I had to do was wait. I walked to the door and stopped. For a moment I considered what was left behind, the house, the life we'd built. But the more I thought about it, the less it mattered. I'd outgrown all of it. Lily's exit had been a long time coming. This was my future now. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her to understand. I just needed to move forward. With the papers in hand, I headed out to the car, ready for the next phase. The silence of the house felt heavier now, but I didn't mind. Soon enough, Lily would realize how thoroughly I'd prepared. And by then, it would be too late. The call from Mara came in the middle of my morning coffee. I was sitting at the kitchen counter, the quiet of the house pressing in on me. It had been a few days since I signed the final documents, and the tension was starting to build again. I picked up the phone, hearing Mara's voice on the other end, brisk and to the point, just the way I liked it. "Jason, we've got a situation." Lily and Connor's lawyer didn't fully understand the scope of the assets involved in the divorce. I felt a chill run through me. "What do you mean?" "They're pushing for more," she said, her tone sharp. "They thought they could leverage the business, but they didn't dig deep enough. They missed some things. A few trusts, some offshore accounts. You've got them locked up tight." I sat up straighter, the words sinking in. You're telling me they didn't realize the full extent of it? Exactly. They thought they could pressure you into a settlement. But they missed the mark. This could get ugly for them, Jason. They're going to be blindsided when it all comes to light. I let that hang in the air for a moment, processing. They had no idea what was coming. I had no intention of dragging this out, but it looked like they were going to make me do just that. Mara's voice broke through my thoughts. We're ready to push forward. We can settle this the right way, but we need to make sure they don't try to turn this around on us. I nodded, though I wasn't sure she could hear it. I'm ready. Just let me know what comes next. Good. I'll keep you updated. I hung up and stared at the phone, a weird sense of calm settling over me. I'd already won. The battle wasn't over, but I knew how it was going to end. They were playing checkers and I was playing chess. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen, seeing Lily's name flash across the display. I almost didn't answer, but I felt the urge to hear what she had to say. I swiped to accept the call. What do you want, Lily? I said, trying to keep my voice even. There was no point in pretending I cared anymore. I need to know what the hell you think you're doing. She spat, her voice laced with frustration. Why are you doing this to me? To us? I wasn't surprised by the anger, but it still felt like a gut punch, hearing her use the word us. It had been gone for so long, and now she wanted to act like this was some kind of mutual decision. I'm not doing anything to you, Lily, I said, leaning back in my chair. You've made your choice and I've made mine. Don't pull this shit with me, she shot back. You've been planning this for months. You're manipulating everything. Everything. You think I don't see what you're doing? You think you can just take it all from me? I let the words fall into silence. Her accusation stung, but only because I could see the frustration in her voice. She knew she'd lost control. She wasn't getting what she thought she would, and it was too late to change that now. You're the one who left, Lily, I said, my voice steady. You're the one who decided to throw this all away. Now you want to cry about it? It doesn't work that way. She was quiet for a long moment. I could almost hear her calculating her next move, but there was nothing she could say that would change anything. You're a bastard, you know that? She finally muttered. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She hung up before I could get another word in, and I didn't bother to call back. I'd already made my peace. She wasn't my problem anymore. The court hearing was scheduled for the following week. The room was sterile, the air thick with tension as both sides prepared their cases. Mara and I sat across from Lily and her lawyer, who had a smug look on his face like they already had the upper hand. They didn't. When the judge called for the proceedings to start, Lily's lawyer immediately went on the offensive, listing their demands for a fair 50-50 split of the assets, including the business. I sat there, arms crossed, giving nothing away. I didn't need to argue. Mara had this handled. But then the moment came. Mara stood, filing a motion with a calm authority. Your Honor, we have additional documents that have not yet been presented. We would like to submit these for consideration. The judge nodded, signaling for her to continue. Mara handed over the paperwork. These documents outline the full scope of Mr. Hayes's financial holdings, including assets and trusts not previously disclosed in the initial filings. We believe they've been omitted, whether intentionally or due to oversight on the other side. Lily's lawyer blinked, his confident facade cracking for the first time. What is this? He asked, his voice rising slightly. Mara didn't flinch. These are offshore accounts and protected investments that were kept separate from the business. All legally shielded, all accounted for. The judge's eyes narrowed as he glanced through the documents. I could see the change in his demeanor, his expression turning more critical. He looked up at Lily and her lawyer, then back at Mara. It seems these assets have been well hidden. Lily's face went pale. I caught her eyes for the first time since we'd entered the room, and for the first time I saw her blindsided. She was finally starting to understand the magnitude of what I'd done. I felt no glee, no sense of victory, just a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure things went the way they had to. And the way they had to was this way, with no drama, no mess, just the facts. The judge didn't say much more after that. He adjourned the session, clearly needing more time to review the new information. As I stood up to leave, Mara shot me a quick, approving glance. There was nothing to say. The trap had been set, and now it was only a matter of time before it closed around them. The final ruling came a week later, and the rest of the divorce was settled quickly. I was done with the courts, done with the fighting. The legal battle had dragged on long enough, and now it was just about cleanup. I didn't want to stay in the house anymore. Too many memories, too many ghosts of a life I wasn't living anymore. So, I packed up what little I had left and moved into a small place by the lake. It was simple, quiet, and exactly what I'd wanted for a long time. I spent the first morning there on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the water ripple gently in the wind. The sun was still low, and there was a calm I hadn't felt in years. The kind of calm that comes when you finally let go of something that's been holding you down. I was still unpacking when my phone buzzed on the counter, the familiar ding signaling a text. I didn't need to look to know it was from Lily. "You've destroyed our family. I hope you're happy. You turned Emma against me. You'll never understand how much I gave up for you." I stared at the message for a few seconds, letting the words roll around in my head. The same accusations, the same blame, the same rewriting of history. I deleted it without responding. The truth didn't matter to her anymore, and it sure as hell didn't matter to Emma either. She'd chosen her mother's side a long time ago, long before the divorce papers were ever filed. I hadn't expected anything different. I couldn't blame her, but it didn't make it any easier to accept. The message from Lily was just more of the same. A last-ditch effort to make me feel guilty, to keep me attached to the narrative she was trying to spin. I didn't bite. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and headed down to the lake. The walk was short, the sound of my boots crunching on the gravel path the only noise. The air was cool, crisp, the kind of day that made you feel alive. I reached the water's edge, sitting down on the dock and staring out at the view. The stillness was unlike anything I'd known in years. It wasn't peaceful because everything was perfect. It was peaceful because everything was finally settled. The storm had passed, and there was nothing left to do but breathe. I didn't have to worry about Lily anymore. I didn't have to worry about playing the part of the man she wanted me to be. I had done what I needed to do for myself, for the life I was finally building. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. No more trying to fix something that wasn't broken. Just me, the water, and the quiet. I sat there for hours watching the ripples form and fade, the way the world just kept moving forward, no matter what happened. It was a strange, calming comfort. I had no regrets. I'd made my peace with everything that had happened. And now I was free.